A very good morning to all of you. We are here today to discuss the ML ops for Gen AI. Going for some introductions and introducing myself first. So I'm Hina Dixit. I'm a partner at M12, which is Microsoft's venture fund. And prior to joining M12, I was at Samsung Next, where I had AI investments, and I invested in companies like Mosaic ML, Stability AI, and a bunch of more. Prior to that, I was at Apple, where I was in basically a team lead and tech lead and engineer, manager, a bunch of roles that I did during my time for 8 years there, and focused a lot on developer tools, AI, ML, in core ML org, a lot of CVML stuff, and then here we are. So moving forward to Kemi for introducing herself.
Good morning. Can you all hear me? Good. Kemi Nelson. I lead a team for Liberty Mutual Insurance that is responsible for creating the strategic vision for our MLOps tools. I'm a VP of Data Products and Strategy, and I'm on the end-to-end, everything related to tools around BI, analytics, data science, platform tools. Prior to that, I've been in banking for almost 2 decades in various analytics leadership disciplines and managing data in various forms. I started my life out on an oil rig out in the Atlantic as an engineer, and quickly found out living on an oil rig probably wasn't the thing for me. But since then, just done different adventures with analytics, and my biggest passion is leading the talent, the analytics talent, and just developing that.
Dmitry.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dmitry. I am founder CEO of Iterative AI. It's a company behind open source tool DVC, Data Version Control. We build tools for data management, especially for unstructured data, right? Images, audio, and such. The tool-based good portion of our software is open source, so some of you might be familiar with these tools. Before, early in my career, I was at Microsoft as well. I was a data scientist at Bing.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. Good morning. I hope everybody got some good rest last night. My name is Rahul Ponnala. I'm the founder CEO of Granica. I'm a mathematician by training and trade. We are a team of scientists, primarily researchers from Stanford, combining large-scale distributed systems with fundamental data engineering to bring what we call AI efficiency services to the world. So we are primarily in the pre-processing stage of your AI pipeline, and we help companies deploy AI efficiently and safely.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sunanda Parthasarathy, currently leading head of data science at Dixit Sporting Goods. And before this, I've been at CVS, Wayfair, a bunch of startups. And I've been focusing predominantly on ML AI applications within retail and ad tech, if you will. And my background is all in physics, where just like many others, after a PhD and a postdoc, decided that data science is maybe fun and moved over here, and it's been a wonderful journey. And my focus has been how to maximize value out of AI and ML in businesses, and also leading teams that feel good about building these things. So excited to be with this esteemed group here.
That's great. So we have a very well-balanced panel here with a lot of technical intelligence and background, and a lot of leadership background as well. Welcome everyone. Very excited to do this with you guys. So we have hit an inflection point for AI, in the recent months, and these have been some crazy times, right? And a lot of organizations in AI can get this AI FOMO, and they still need to be strategic enough, right? Still need to make sure that they are able to achieve and cater to their business needs and customer needs. But at the same time, they don't want to miss out on the AI buzz that's there. So let's chat a little bit about what types of problems are solvable using LLMs, Gen AI, and other AI products. So let's discuss this like with a panel. So Kemi, do you want to go first?
Certainly. I think where AI excels the most is the repeatability and deconstructing complexity. So when you think of all those, different problem statements that we've seen, whether it be in pattern recognition, those are the standard problem scope that you'll see AI really excel in. On the other hand, when it gets to things like the complex human intuition, complex decision-making that requires intellectual empathy, then you might see some limitations with AI. However, just the plethora of the scope of problem statements that you can solve with AI is, I think we're still exploring it. I think it's almost limitless. So it's with, things like pattern recognition, cleansing. It's really across industries as well.
Fantastic. Dmitry, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, absolutely. So industry worked with AI, ML for quite a bit of time, right? And industry knows pretty well how to deal with what we call like traditional machine learning, right? Like tabular data and stuff. But in the past year, everything changed, right? LLMs, generative AI, and industry is still like figuring out. That's what I see. Experimenting with the new ideas and trying to find the area when an impact would be the biggest. But what I can see that the most impact I would expect from the area that we already know how to solve with AI when LLMs, generative AI can accelerate this area. Example is multimodality, right? Before, like everyone was working with one modality, which is like, it's a text only, right? Or it's images only, right? Mm-hmm. For example, healthcare, we get like a X-ray, right? And we get a prediction if there is some cancer or not, right? Today, all the research in healthcare, they're saying like that's not enough, right? We can we can add more data about the patient, age, smoker, not smoker, and such, right? And then create better predictions first of all, right? And maybe prediction is not enough. Maybe we should generate like text as next steps for the doctors, right? Or maybe we should create a chat with the doctor to kind of talk with the model, right? So that's what I see that people are already working today. And I have like a lot of expectation of this like multimodality and to the acceleration, huge acceleration to the area that we already know how to solve, but we can get to the absolute next level with a new approach, with the new models.
Rahul?
Yeah, thank you. I think maybe a controversial point of view, but I think that before companies have an AI strategy, they have to have a data strategy. You have to figure out where your data is. Is the data really useful for your machine learning and AI modeling to begin with? Because bad data will lead to bad AI outcomes, no matter how great your GPU infrastructure might be, no matter how great your models are, right? So I think like figuring out, if you're a retail company, figuring out, are you storing any private information of users? Scrubbing that data, preparing it, and before consumption of any of the data in your AI models, right? Also figuring out things like, are there any duplicates of data? Is there any high value information or low value information that you're storing that will not be useful for your AI models? I think those questions are extremely key to understand before anybody implements an successful AI strategy to begin with. So I think like I'm super excited about the progress in the AI world with respect to generative AI and things of that nature. But honestly speaking, I think there are some fundamental questions related to data itself that needs to be solved first. And the beauty about this is no external company can help you with this, so to speak, right? You have to actually figure this out yourselves. You are the experts as companies, as leaders, what have you. You're the experts to actually figure this out internally. Sit down with your team, figure this out, ask fundamental questions of, is my data actually like being stored the way it should be stored? Am I capturing all the kind of insights that I can before even starting LLMs or generative AI, so to speak? So thank you.
Sunanda.
Yeah, thanks for that, Rahul, because that is a great segue for what I was thinking. And I think if I may restructure that question a little bit, instead of asking what problems can and cannot be solved by AI, to Rahul's point, you give good data, the AI model whatever model it is, will predict something. The question is, what is, as a business, having a strategy around risk tolerance, certainty tolerance, right? Really understanding that a model will spit out something that you ask it to spit out with some confidence, right? And then internalizing those confidence estimates and saying, and having that human in the loop and understanding, is this something I want to take a risk on? So example, granular things, how much should I sell of a certain thing next week? Models will do great. It has a lot of information. It will give you good certainty. And that is a risk that most companies can take and say, okay, I'm going to plan my, allocation to stores using that. Reel back at a high level, the same forecasting problem with like longer time frames or financial planning, that comes with a much higher risk. Then it becomes a question of what is the confidence that the model is giving you? Are you as a business comfortable with that confidence? And then deciding whether AI is a solution for you. So to me, very simply put, you could solve any problem with AI if you give it great data, but is that the right choice for you? In some scenarios where it is highly strategic, where the risk is high, you still want a human in the loop assessing whether this output from AI is something that you want to use or not and go forward. So to me, it's a very business level, strategy level decision rather than here is a rubric for these are all the problems that AI can solve and these are all the problems where you shouldn't go with an AI solution.
Like Sunanda, you were talking a little bit about the data aspect of these enterprises, right? So while these enterprise companies are trying to adapt AI, right? Like a lot of these companies have these legacy, data ecosystems. So I just want to understand, what is going to be the impact of these legacy data ecosystems to the adaptation of AI? And what is the actual problem there? And how can we solve it?
Yes, I think it's one of the biggest, if not the major roadblocks for adoption of AI and machine learning for a lot of the big organizations especially. And to me, it's twofold. One is the actual technology challenge, right? Usually there are monoliths, there are systems that cannot be adapted to the newer technology. So it's those answers to me are actually solvable because, you put the right talent against it, they will break it down. You can get a monolith of a repository broken down into APIs and services. All that to me, is a solvable, easy, a lot of hard work, but straightforward solution, if you will, if you put your heart and mind and invest the money and the talent in it. The second aspect of it to me is the fundamental change management, the cultural change, the getting people rowing in the same direction. That is a harder thing, and a lot of leaders and organizations completely are not thinking about it. They're heavily focused on how do I get the talent? Where do I put it? How do I do it? But there is resistance for various reasons, some good, some not so great. But as leaders of an organization, I think those two go hand in hand, thinking about how do I enforce this change management? How do I get people excited about this new technology? How do I put people, help them understand that why they should put so much effort in changing that monolith? Because the common refrain is it works. It's going great. I'm continually improving it. So why should I change everything? And the other refrain that you will often hear is, okay, today you are asking me to change and whatever, go to this cloud. Tomorrow you will say something else. That's the crux of it. Those are all genuine concerns that shouldn't be sidelined saying, oh, you don't have a growth mindset or, that is part of it. But there is another element around, okay, how do I help this team or organization function as an agile organization so that the next time, today it's generative AI, 5 months from now, it'll be something else. The teams have to change. And really getting that as their fundamental DNA and the way they function. So agile methodologies, product support models, things like that will help them pivot quickly, I think is the other aspect that to me is the harder part.
I
Kemi,
do
you
want
want
to
to
build on that a bit. Change management. You touched on something that I get excited about. Who in this room has heard the terminology VUCA? VUCA. It's an acronym, okay? At least one person, okay. VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And that defines the world we're operating in any business frame. Change management is so crucial. So I threw one out, VUCA. Who has heard about the Harvard MIT phenomenon?
Has anyone?
Okay.
Enlighten us.
I'll try. It's a translation problem statement. Typically, who goes to business school? Harvard people. Harvard people are the ones formulating the strategic vision, the strategies. Who executes? The techie people, usually MIT. They don't speak well to each other. This is actually an academic problem statement that is real. It really applies to AI adoption. And it's a change management and translation problem statement. A lot of us techies like to be in our world tools. You know, we want to like go for the tools, solve for the tools. And that's not even the organizational problem statement around our adoption. It's connecting your solution to that business person that owns the revenue that you need to get the money from. Ultimately, that's the adoption problem statement. Legacy ecosystems, if you can get a business leader to understand the need, they will pay for it. It speaks for itself in ROI. The trick is that translation. It's getting them to come alongside. It's speaking it in the language that you, the MIT person, is speaking to the Harvard ears, is being able to speak that language and get them to adopt it. I can go on this for a year. So I'll pause there and feel free to chat after, okay?
Dmitry, you want to go chat about this like a little from a technical perspective maybe and your founder's perspective in general?
So with some companies, yeah, they're going through some different types of adoption. It's also a good portion of this is kind of like a cultural change in the company, because before, like, you have a very clear answer, like, should we give a loan to some person or not, right? And you know, like, who is responsible for the decision. When you deal with the models, right?
Yeah.
You kind of don't know, right? It's a model, it's a process. And that's a big change, which some companies adapt very well, right? Especially like internet company, because they operate on these numbers and models, right? And the traditional businesses are still not, and they need to get used to this kind of operational mode when they trust the process, not like specific like individual people. It's a big cultural change. I have seen this in my career when some boss came, like when I was data scientist, came and say, hey, you know what, we missed this person in the data set, and that's like a mistake. We look at this particular record and say, yeah, that's a mistake, but that's okay. Our model is like 93% accurate. We are making mistakes, right? You cannot make you cannot build model without mistakes. And that's what the company needs to adopt from traditional industry, and it's a huge change. It's like a pilot, right? Sometimes they don't see like a visibility is 0 and they just use devices, right, to land the plane. And business needs to learn this, like how to do this, how to operate by the numbers without like having like a clear answer, clear responsible person for the decision.
Yeah. Rahul, what do you think?
Yeah, thank you. Again, maybe a controversial point of view, but more fundamentalist, I would say a point of view. I think as an engineer or scientist, right, I get super excited about technology, right? But more often than not, early in my career, I asked myself, and this is kind of advice that I got from my mentor, which is, are you actually like trying to build technology in search of a problem? Or are you identifying what your problem is and then figuring out what technology solutions you have that can solve that problem? Right? So I think like engineers and scientists and data science teams, right, we have a tendency of actually going after, right, the coolest technology that is out there, right? I don't think that's a bad thing to do, but figuring out timelines and actually having some KPIs with respect to what is a business objective that you have, right? That this technology can actually solve, that's where leadership needs to step in. That's where leadership needs to come in, right? You don't want to thwart technology for the sake of saying, oh, this thing is just going to take me more time, budget, what have you. But figuring out what are the KPIs, consensus kind of driven analysis of, okay, this is going to move the needle for my business. Okay, let me invest a couple of resources, build a very quick prototype, and then sort of identifying again, is this really solving the problem 1 month, 2 months, 3 months down the road? So I think it's really key to figure out what is the technology, what is the problem, and problems comes first.
One thing I will add, I know you wanted something technical, is traditionally a lot of the data ecosystem is comprised of warehouses. It's, siloed, oftentimes disparate warehouses that don't talk to each other. When you get into an AI world, typically you'll want to go to the cloud. Some of those are some of the problems I've seen technically that companies have experienced with AI adoption. It takes quite a shift in going from, the traditional ecosystem where, excuse me, the data structures are siloed. To go into this ecosystem where, yes, AI can actually help solve for some of that, but it's to get people to make that pivot to the new ecosystem.
Very good. Let's move to the next thought now. So while these companies are talking and thinking about their data problems and maybe the data type is unstructured, non-ID data, or it's a structured data, there's a lot of data that's actually in silo, right? Like Kemi mentioned. So in such kind of data structure or kind of how we are storing our data, we don't know where the data is, a lot of it is siloed. And then there is that aspect of data security, right? So that can be one of the factors that can lead to some hurdles in adaptation of AI by these different companies and enterprises. So what's your take on that, Dmitry? Again, back to you.
So with unstructured data, data security, data problems become much more interesting ones, right?
Yeah.
Because when you have tabular data, this is the person, this is the person's social, right?
Yeah.
And I should be very careful about this particular column, right? You know exactly where the security problem is, right? You know what to protect, how to protect, even in this a very simple table level, right? When you work with images, audio, right?
Yeah.
You look at the image, how the system can say if there is something, some security problem there. Maybe it's an image of social security number, right? Or maybe it's a picture that's a person don't want to share, right, for some reason, but you got it. So again, we got to this mode when you need to operate like a pilot with zero visibility by only looking to your models and trusting your models and process around it. And that's become tricky, very tricky. And some companies, we work a lot with advanced generative AI companies. They know this very well. They're kind of native in this world. They operate by numbers, no problem, no questions. They're not even no questions, right? But from the traditional business point of view, who get used to very clear signals, responsible people for the signals, for them, this change, it's crucial. For them, it's really hard to make the change when they say, okay, we believe we trust the model, and this is how we operate if something goes wrong.
Rahul?
Yeah, I think a more technical an answer over here, or the way I would say a mindset over here would be around, it's from a numerical analysis standpoint, right? Like if you take a Parquet file or a CSV file, like Dmitry was talking about, right? It's very easy to basically, again, scrub for private information that you're storing. But I think you got to understand and decipher, again, going back to the principles of, okay, if I'm using Databricks or Snowflake, right? Are there existing plugins that Snowflake or Databricks provides that can solve this problem for you? Mm-hmm. And fundamentally, I think it comes down to two things, right? One is data privacy itself, right? So understanding what is business critical, not just PII in general, but you might be storing some sensitive information that your business leadership has deemed as sensitive, right? So customization, I think, is problem number one, right? Being able to be extensible to your application needs and your data needs, your business needs, that's key. Two is I have seen a lot of like applications and plugins out there that work at a very small scale. But when you deploy it at the scale that your business really needs, right, that's when things break apart. So in a POC or prototype, a key KPI I think that you got to basically focus on is, and have this sort of mindset and kind of challenge the vendor or what have you, is this going to work at the scale that my business needs? Billions of objects, petabytes of data, unstructured, structure, can this work in a data agnostic fashion? And again, building those quick prototypes that can actually like have a diverse perspective of things, I think that's the key. So privacy, customization, and then scale. I think those are the three key things that you got to focus on.
Sunanda?
Yeah, and building on what Rahul said and like the original question of structured data versus unstructured data, yes, the world is messier like unstructured data in these recent times, and the stuff that we could do with unstructured data becomes much more complex. And within structured data, I think there are like innovative solutions, a little for Granica, like tools like that the companies can research into, leverage, figure out how to, keep the PII safe. For the unstructured piece of it, I think there are still standards being set as we speak about how, like, what does consent mean? When I say you can use it for certain training, what part of my data? It becomes very complicated when you talk about unstructured data. And that's where companies, I feel, from a technical standpoint, there are creative ways to still get to your end goal. There are open source data sets. There are data augmentation ways in which, without having to sacrifice your standards of data privacy, you can still do interesting Gen AI and other kind of applications. It's really important to think through how else can I do this and not just go to let's figure out how to get the consent. Let's just push. Like, you don't have to push that boundary. There are ways in which there are research data sets, there are open data sets, there are many other things, augmented data sets, techniques that you could be doing to really keep your standard and as a brand that respects data privacy. And the third element I would say is how many organizations are really laying out that rubric and standard for their own teams in terms of how to think. Like, does every data scientist team understand that this is how I should be treating the customer data? Like, do they understand what is their organization's policy for data privacy? That's a big question for me. Like, I think there's a lot of work that leadership needs to do to be very thoughtful, not just in figuring out, not just in being within the legal constraints. Like, that's usually how they approach it. But I think there needs to be a mind shift there on, okay, I need to respect this data, but I still need to give that customer experience that is great. And how do I make it happen? And like, how do I educate my team, which is like usually the analysts and the data scientists, to respect that privacy? So there needs to be that communication standard set within the organization to help, have a healthy atmosphere of data security and privacy.
Very interesting.
I can add to this. So this world has become very interesting on the context of this unstructured data, and that's exactly like how Sunanda said. We need to set this like standards, like how to operate this, and we need to learn how to like operate in this process, how to set the process, because it looks like very simple. Okay, I have like a model which says me if these images have a safe enough content or not. Basically, can I use this image or not? Right? Yeah. It seems easy, right? But in reality, is in a couple months or maybe a couple of years, you will get another model, right, which answers the same question, and some images will be like misclassified, right? Yeah. And then the question is, okay, but what? So you are saying this picture is safe regarding which model, which version of the model it is safe? When you answer this question, the next question would be, okay, this model, which data it was trained on, you get into the same set of problems that we traditionally had in traditional machine learning, right? But the environment is completely different, and tool set is absolutely not ready for that, right? Because you cannot just take data warehouse, put like lineage solution on top, and then solve in traditional way. It doesn't work anymore because you have like a raw data in buckets, files, like so. Everything needs to be reinvented, and yeah, it has to be started with a kind of mindset processes, but the tool support is needed.
Very cool. Kemi, do you want to add something? Yeah.
Well, the thing that just came to mind as you were talking was AI can actually help solve some of these problems because of its capacity to analyze unstructured data. So building an AI tool, to your point, can actually help solve some of the security challenges.
Very cool. So usually a successful POC is very common, like, with the enterprise adaptation of AI. But when it comes to making that POC to production or adapting that, right, for your real use case in the real production data, why is that hard? Why is that less common? And how can we help scale AI for these enterprises?
I can go first.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Granica primarily sort of deals with, billions of objects, petabytes of data, kind of, again, structured, unstructured, what have you. So we have direct sort of experience. I would say we're a good machine learning model that does average approximation across a bunch of dozens of companies that we work with. So I think I can speak to this in some authority. I think the key ingredient over here is, it comes down to the business KPIs, right? Which is, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? And what is the scale of data that you have at your disposal that you can use to test a model, right? What is the validation data set? Basic things like, what is your objective function? What is the validation data set? And if you train a model on whatever corpus of data, right, is it actually going to basically perform at the efficiency that you need in production or not? And then continuously sort of reevaluating the model, right, as your data drifts, as your data changes, right? Because you can't just basically have a model that you trained on some data and then basically assume that that's the universal model that's going to work in, the extent of time, right? That's never the case, right? So when do you retrain? What are the triggers that you have in terms of your retraining process? And how do you evaluate those things again, having those objective functions in core perspective? That's the key. The second point is around diversity of data itself, right? So when it comes to scale, when it comes to diversity, you have to think about, okay, do I actually have just one specific type of data? Or am I sourcing this data from different diverse sort of data sources that need some sort of transformation in place before it's usable in a machine learning model? So how do you normalize that data? How do you actually ensure that the data is being put to use? I think that's another key. The third aspect of this, I would say, extremely fundamental, is just privacy in general. Goes back to the point that we were making earlier, which is, do I have any private information that I may risk kind of the AI model getting trained on? Because again, AI doesn't have memory itself, right? Again, these vector databases and things of that nature, embeddings and what have you, may actually bring that memory to perspective. But at the end of the day, the model itself is basically a bunch of weights, right? So where the risk is you ask it intelligent questions, and if you train it on private data, it's going to spit out that private information for you. So that's where the key ingredient of data anonymization, data privatization sort of comes into play. How do you protect your data? How do you actually ensure that the data is being put to use in an effective manner at a scale and the diversity? Those are the things that you got to ask, right? And challenge your tools and platforms that you're trying to bring in-house. And once you do that, I think you'll end up being successful no matter what the technology really is.
That's a great answer. I want to move to actually next question, if you guys don't mind. So looking into the future, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, on the productionization side, it's first of all, there are a couple components on this, right?
Sure,
One is production of the model, right? And second is on the tool side, on ML ops tools. So my experience mostly on ML ops tools because we are building tools. But before I was scientist and we work with the scientists a lot, right? We know the first part as well. And there's a lot of kind of maybe misunderstanding of this goals and processes on data science, and people are saying, oh, this is common phrase, right? 80% models not getting to production, right? And that's the problem. I don't see it as a problem. this is just a nature of the process. You're supposed to create like a models over and over again, right? And in majority of the cases you fail, and it's fine. The goal is to get a good model. And if your team built like 10 models, only one got to production, that's maybe a good result. Yeah. That's one aspect. On the tool set side, it's a little bit different. It's about like, I've seen many times like when people start using tools and the tool doesn't get out of like one small team in a huge organization, which is like a big red flag, right? And but successful productization of the MLOps tools should kind of explode in the organization. If a team take one tool, start to use the tool, that's great. But what you should see in the future that another team in this org is start using the tool. The third team is start using the tool. Then the platform team came here and say, hey, what's going on here? I need to be part of that, right? So that's another kind of like trajectory of this like productionization development tools inside the organization. But that's completely a different story from the 80% models does not get to production.
Does anybody else want to add to it, or?
I'll just quickly add one more element to this, which is, I think the tools space is huge, all right? There are multiple steps in the model lifecycle that goes from the EDA or the POC, then the MVP, and then the final productionalization. Firstly, understanding the team that builds it, understanding what you're trying to finally solve at scale is so important. I've known of instances where the team builds a fantastic POC, everything else has been checked out, but they don't have visibility into where exactly it's going to get deployed, and therefore they don't even know things like what is the SLA for the return, right? Like, so if it's a recommendation engine that's going to serve on an e-commerce website versus where somewhere it's getting sent in a batch mode and emails, it's a whole different story, and you would have designed it in a very different way if you had that. So it goes back to like, how do you make sure there is that integrated cross-functional approach to solving these problems, even though the data science team might be the one that's building the models. So that's a key piece. And the other is around like having very standardized ML ops, DevOps that is modified for machine learning use cases, standardized, and there is a process flow that is documented for the organization that they follow through, because that will help you understand what are the tests you need to have at what stages in the model lifecycle, which really will reduce a lot of surprises at the end, which stops models from becoming production ready. The third element I would say is getting the end user adopted to it right at the beginning, right? There have been cases where it has been like the final delivery of this model has to be with a UI team. The UI team, so you build it, you're all done with your everything, and you're finally roping in the UI team because that's when they have to know what it is. And they're like, this is nowhere in my Q3 planning. I cannot support you. It sits down, that's it, like it's a stop, right? So it really is important to make sure you understand where that final delivery point is for your specific use case of the model, and then make sure they are roped in, make sure that is all set in their planning stages, so that when you are ready with it, they are there to help. And I think like all these elements need to come together really, and there, as you can see, there are many places where it can drop.
Great. So looking into the future, like, what kind of platforms and products, Rahul, do you think are most valuable to the industry, like, in the space of AI?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think any tool or any platform that an enterprise is trying to bring in-house, there are two fundamental things that it has to do. One is it has to be extensible. So your team should be able to take the tool, take the platform, fit it to the needs of your business, right? The second thing is it has to basically be an API-driven, a plugin-driven interface, right? Because you're looking at, your developers, your applications, the applications keep changing and what have you. The APIs need to basically be transparently pluggable within your ecosystem of applications. And if they're not extensible, and if your teams are unable to mold those things, right, to the fits of whatever your business requirements are, then no matter what tool you bring in-house, no matter how great the platform really is, it's never going to get the adoption that it requires to productionize their solution, right? So I think like any generative tool that you're trying to bring in-house, any LLM or any data privatization sort of, thing that you're trying to basically, like, again, bring in-house, buy a solution, or even build in-house, right? You got to think about extensibility. You got to think about an API interface as such.
The one thing I'll just quickly add to that as well, Rahul, is the cost observability. I'm starting to see that as a very important trend, especially in large organizations. The observability of the cost basis is important in cloud because of the usage, and each function wants to be able to allocate for it appropriately.
Great.
That's a great point, actually. I'm on the board of FinOps, and we talk about this all the time.
That's great. Awesome. So that would be the end of our discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you.